All right, so I'm going to go through the process of just creating the wireframe and how that translates into code. This is kind of the idea too, where you can even start with a mood board, and then that becomes your project eventually. So first, I'm just going to open up Photoshop. Everybody should have that link through Zoom. I'll send it through Canvas after I do this. So when I open up Photoshop and I go to New Document for the first time, so File, New, I get this new document window, and I go straight to Web. So initially, I'm going to think about the wireframe for a standard web page. And this is showing you right here, most common size. So I will start with that. Now in Photoshop, you'll see the width in pixels, orientation. There's a couple things that you can look at in the preset section. One thing is artboards. So this is kind of optional in the beginning. By default, Photoshop is turning it on. This is something new. I think 2020, they started to turn this on by default. You may not want to have this turned on. So what you can do is click this off. And I'll show you the advantage of using an artboard. But initially, I think it's helpful to turn it off. And then you can decide if you want to use it. And everything else here, just want to make sure that your resolution is set to 72. And your color mode is RGB, something you should always think about as you're designing. So here is where I'm going to start for my initial wireboard. Now, in Photoshop, I'm using the Cintiq. So here, it's a little bit off. So I got to actually go into my control panel here and recalibrate the pen. So let's see here. So I'm going to adjust just got to calibrate the Cintiq here. So I'm going to go into tablet properties real quick and do a calibration. So okay, so that should be good. Let me do it one more time. All right, so in Photoshop, I'm going to be working initially just with the pencil tool. So here with your brushes, underneath the brush tool is a pencil tool. Now, if you don't see that tool, sometimes you have to go into your toolbar, edit toolbar, and do a restore defaults if you don't see it. But the pencil tool is right here underneath the brush tool. And for my initial wireframe, I just like to draw it. Now this is something that I like to do. In your layers palette in Photoshop, I will create a new layer. So you click on the little box with a plus sign. And then I just want to start off with black, hit OK. And maybe make your point size a little bit bigger, like 4. And then here I can just kind of figure out what I want to do. So this is kind of like my napkin sketch. So maybe I have a banner going across. Maybe this is some sort of informational content. Maybe inside my banner I have a nav bar. So I don't care if this is not perfect at this point. Then I have maybe in this area the main content, and then down below is my footer. So this is like my first sketch. After I have this laid out and I like it, what I'll do is a couple things. So I will maybe start to add some guides. So I can go into Photoshop now, go under Window, under View, and go to Rulers. And you click on Rulers, it's Control R. And now I can start to drag out some guides. The measurement units, if I right click on the measurement units, I can see they're in pixels. So it's good to just keep them in pixels. That's what the setting was when I created the new document. And now I'm going to start to add out some guides to like figure out where everything is at. So maybe I want to have margins of 50 pixels on the left and right. And you'll see as you drag these guides out that they're going to actually kind of click to the pixels sometimes. So that's like a snapping feature. Like right here, these pixels for the banner that I drew on top, it's kind of clicking right there. So it's sometimes helpful just to turn off snapping. So you can go into view and then just turn it off. And now when I drag this out, it's not going to snap. So let's say I just want 50 pixels for my margins. I'm not going to worry about the bottom margin because the web page is going to extend anyways, so that's something that we don't need to think about unless you want a fixed size web page. And here, 1366, I'm just going to make this 1316. And then what I can do now is maybe add some additional guides for the other parts of this wireframe that I'm starting to create. And then if that's good, then the next thing I'll do is I'll create a new layer. And then I'll go to that initial layer that I drew on, and I'll start to fade out the opacity. So that initial drawing is just something that helped me in the beginning to figure out where I want to lay out my initial boxes for the wireframe. And then after you do that, what you can do is you can go into your shape tool. So above the hand in your toolbar, you have this little hand here. You can click on that circle, and then go into your rectangle tool. And with this, I want to go up in your control bar on top. Make sure your fill is set to none. So the way you do that is you go into fill, and you click on this diagonal. So now it's set to none. And then you go into your stroke, and make sure that it is set to black. And then you also have a point size that's next to that. So I'll increase the point size. Maybe make it, that's fine, like around 6 pixels. And now I'll start to drag out boxes. Now here I initially turned off the snapping, so maybe I want to turn it back on now when I drag these boxes. Because the boxes now that I drag out are going to snap to my guides. So that's the going to be the banner on top. Now every time you drag a box out, it's going to create a new layer, which is fine. I'll drag this one for the side box. I have this main part of the page here, and then I have a box down below for my footer. And then I think I put a smaller box within this for like a nav bar, so maybe margin of like 20 pixels. So this is set to 1316, so 12, 16 pixels for that guide for this nav bar. And then I can drag out this, and this, let's say this is my nav, some sort of nav bar. So there's my wireframe. So that's my initial wireframe. And then the next thing I might want to do is start to add information inside these boxes so I know exactly what the boxes are for. So this is where you can start to actually add tags. So I'll use my text tool. I'll go to T for the text tool. So this box in the middle. Are you guys still seeing this on Zoom, by the way? Let me, everybody's still good with Zoom? Okay. So here, this main box, I'll call this one, let's say, main. Okay, so that's my main section. This box on top, let's say, let's call this one header. Just kind of make it a little neater. This box over here, I'm going to call it an aside. So this is an actual tag. An aside is basically a sidebar that contains information. It's not the most important information on the web page, but it could be like tips or facts or, you know, kind of info nuggets, extra bits of information. And then down below, I'll add my what's called a footer. So there's an actual tag that's a footer tag. So I'm going to add this in my footer. And then this bar within the header, that's my nav bar. So I will add and I have to make that a smaller point size as well, since I have little space. So I'm going to actually decrease the point size. So this is going to be called nav bar. A little bit bigger. And then once I have this set up, this is my wireframe. I'm going to go back to that initial sketch, and I'm just going to turn it off. I don't need that anymore. So the idea behind showing you an initial sketch is that you can just basically create your wireframes on anything, you know, like a napkin, piece of paper, and then take a picture of it, and then import it into Photoshop, scan it directly into Photoshop. So you can do it different ways. You don't have to use Photoshop to do this. Let's see something real quick. I think people are sick of looking at me on YouTube, so I'm trying to see if I can do a little trick. I don't know if this will work. Or, oh. All right, I just wanted to fix this so it's easier for the rest of you. They've been looking at me for too long. Okay, so that's basically the nav bar, right? I'm sorry, the wireframe. And I have a header, an aside, main. Let's say as I continue to work on this, I have images. So maybe within this main, I have a series of images. So I will just, I'll use Photoshop to tell me the width and height. So maybe these images in here are, let's say, .275 by 152. So that's the size of each of these. And I'm going to drag these out by hitting Alt and Shift and then dragging. So basically creating duplicates here. And let's see, I will go ahead and name these as well. So I'll call this one image 1. This is image 2. And this is image. So now I have my layout. So now I can start to look at this and I can start to figure out more things, like the actual sizes and scales that will be used on my web page. So this is where I like to take the actual wireframe to the next level. If you go online, a lot of the wireframes that you see will look like this, and they'll stop at this point. Like this will be the extent to which the wireframe is created. But I want to take it even further. So what I will do is I will start to think about other things besides what I'm naming each section. I'll think about, okay, what are the sizes that I want to use? Maybe what are the colors? that I want to use for this. So let's say I can look at my side. I'll start from the top. I can look at my nav bar. In Photoshop, I have the layers set up. So one of the things I might want to do is actually connect and group things that belong together. So rectangle 1 is my nav bar, and actually it's my header. So I'm going to call this header, and I'm going to find my header, and I'm just going to drag it down. Keep that together. Select them both layers. I'm going to shift click, and then I'm going to group them. So Control G. This is my header. And then what I can do now is I can go to that header, and I can go under, let's see. I'm going to actually close up this here. So I can look, clicking on that header, and I can see that that header is 12,066 pixels by 116 pixels. So I will add that right here. I will say this is 1266 by 116. Just have to make it a little bit smaller. And I'll do this for each section of the web page. So my side is right here. I'm just organizing my layers in Photoshop for this. So I got my aside, and that aside is 232 by 399. I have to make the text a little bit smaller in the boxes. So it's 2. It was 232 by 399. And then the main box, let's say here, is 997 by 399. And since I've been using guides, I know that the main box and the header box, or the side box, are the same size. And then if you add up the width of the aside and the main box and the column that's in between, the margin, let's say here, you should get the length of the header, 1266. So this main box is, I got to click on it again, 997 by 399. 997 by 399. So that's the size of that box. So you do this for the whole wireframe. You kind of go through and figure out what your sizes are. If it's a responsive site, what you can kind of figure out is percentages. So if you want that header to spread out for the full length of the web page, instead of putting a measurement for the width, you just say 100%. And the same thing with this aside and this main. Once we get into responsive, you would say, well, actually this aside will take up maybe 40% of the page, and then your main would be 60%. So it would add up to 100%. So you start to figure out the math for percentages if you're using, if you're creating a responsive site. But once I have this set now, I can start thinking about my HTML, my CSS a little bit better. Now, with some of these names that I'm using to lay out the page, some of those are going to be used as tags. Let me, And some of those will actually be divs. So this word main here does not have an actual name as a tag. So what I can actually do is say, this is a div, and the class equals main. So you can start to actually put the actual code in the wireframe. And that's something that you won't see a lot, but I think as you're starting to design things, I think it helps you understand the translation of code, of image to code, basically. So you're thinking visually, but then you're thinking in terms of what the code should be as well. And that is like an added thing to do. Like I said, you're not seeing that often, and maybe you don't show the client the wireframe at this stage, but I think as a designer it's really helpful, because now I can start to think about my code of brackets. And I already have this design thought out a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of these initial divs here. So the first thing I have now is a header. So I'm going to create a header tag. So there actually is a header tag in HTML, so I can use this. Now inside of the header tag, I have a nav bar. So I'm going to nest the nav bar, and so from a tag standpoint, there isn't a nav bar tag, but there is a nav tag, so I can use nav. And that is semantic, so again, it means the name represents the type of content that's going to appear on the web page. That's your semantic markup. So I have a nav in a header, just like I have right here on the wireframe. And then next on the page, I have my aside. So an aside is an actual tag. Next to the aside, what would come next after I had that aside? What would be the next tag I would want based on my wireframe?
Main.
What?
Main.
Yeah, main. But what would be the actual tag?
Div.
A div. Yeah, the only reason why I'm using a div is because there is no main tag. So I could use a class though, and this will actually start to tell me in my style sheet what class I should be using, and I can apply that right now. I can say the class equals name. So here I am still thinking about my wireframe and ensuring that I'm using classes that represent the type of content that's appearing on the page. And now within that name, what I have are images. So I'm going to actually for the images, I'm going to use divs as well. I'm not going to use an image tag. And I'm going to give each one a class. So I'll have image 1, image 2, and image 3. So I'm just going to kind of paste this. I have an aside. I have next to these aside a div with a class of name, and inside the div I have 3 more divs, image 1, 2, and 3. Then I have my footer. So this is basically the HTML that is being used for this wireframe. This is how the wireframe is being represented in HTML. And next, what I can do is start to create classes for these various tags and these divs that will reflect the sizes that I'm using on the wireframe itself. So in my style tag, I'm going to start to think about what I'm doing here. And so, my header, and I can, for these tags, I'm using the element tag, meaning I'm just using the name of the tag. Or you can create a class. But for now, I'm just using the actual name of the tag. So I have a width. I already know what my width is. That's 1266 because I wrote it right in the wireframe. And then I know what my height is, and that's 116. And then what I'll probably do is give it a color so I actually can see it. So I'll use the background color. I'll use dark gray. Let's see. So I have my header set up. And then inside my header, I have a nav bar. So I'll go, it's called nav. So I have my nav here. I'm just going to copy and paste this. My nav bar is nested within the header. So if my header is 1266, I can center it by giving it a smaller width. So let's say I'll make it 1246. I'm guessing on the height, but I would use the height that I wrote on the wireframe. So maybe it has a height of 30. And then I'll give it a margin of 10 pixels. And then next I will create my aside. So the width is 232. And the height is 399. And background color is I'll just make it gray. Then I have my main class, so it's going to start with period, main, and I'm just going to copy and paste this. So same height, but the width is 997. I'll keep that gray as well. Now what's happening now is this main is coming next to the aside, so what we'll have to do is give it a flow. So for the aside, I'm going to say float left, and then for the main, I'm going to say float right. And then within the div, I have these images. So one of the things you can do is you can, with your CSS, you can use a space to designate that the style is going to be applied to do something like this, multiple classes. So I can do actually use a comma. So use a comma. So you can say image 1, image 2. Image 3, and these three have to add up to a number less than the main image, so I'll just give it a width of 300, give them a width of 300, and then a height. $300, and then background color. I'll make it aqua just for fun. And then And then after that, I have my footer. And that's going to basically be the same width as the header. So we're just going to cut and paste that, and the height it's going to be a little bit less, so maybe 96 pixels. So now I basically use my wireframe to determine my HTML and my style sheet. So, okay, so when I look at this now, a couple things are off. So I have to fix a couple things here. So first off, I can't see my nav bar. I made it the same color as my header, so I'm going to just make that gray. So now I can see the nav bar. Actually, I'll make it more obvious color. I'll make it line. So now I can see my nav bar inside my header. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to get these images. I have these images here, but they're all grouped together. So I want the images to be within the actual main section. So I'll apply a float to the images. I'll say float left. Now with that float, the images are inside this main section. The other thing I want to do now is give it a margin. So for those images, I'll say margin 20 pixels. And I might have to do something less because I have to make sure that they fit within this main box. So I will give it a margin of, let's say, just 10 pixels. So now they fit. So I have my three images. They're a little bit too tall, so I'm also going to reduce the height of the images. So I'll make the height 140. So that's better. Now the other thing about the images though is how they're placed within the box itself. So this is where you guys start thinking about how you're using your floats and how you're using nesting. And the two are going to work together to get the layout that you want. So first off, I have the two boxes for my aside and my aside and my main box here. So what I want to do is I want to actually have them next to each other. So the main box should actually be float left as well. So I'm going to float that left. And then I need to give it a little bit of space. So I'm going to create a margin of, say, 20 pixels. I'll actually give both a margin of 20 pixels. So they'll have 40 pixels in between. So now I have, it's getting a little bit closer to my wireframe, what I had in my wireframe. The other thing that's happening now is that the footer, if I give it a different color, I'll make it red, let's say. The footer is actually coming right after the header, and I want the footer to be below the main box and the aside. So what you have to do now is start thinking in terms of nesting. So this aside here and this div with the classic name, they're actually together on the page itself. I want them to be together. So what I would do is create another box, and this box would wrap around this box is going to wrap around this. So what I need is a box to nest the div and the aside in so they actually stay together and to push the footer down. So actually, there's going to be a box here. So the red line is going to designate another div that I create, and maybe the div for this box we call, I'll call it, let's say section. I'll call it section 1. Let's say I have multiple sections. Eventually there's more sections on the page. So I'm going to have another div called section 1. So that div is going to wrap around the main and the side boxes here. So I'm going to create a new div, add the class equal to section 1. And that wraps around this aside and this div, the main. And then section 1 here, let's say, the height has to be the height of the aside and the main, so it has to actually be greater than that. So if I have a height of 399 for the aside in the dot main class, maybe I'll make the height of the section 420. And the width is going to be, basically the width is also going to be the combination of the width of the height and the main plus the margins. So that width is going to be 232 plus 997. Let's just round it up. So 1,000 plus, let's say 240, that's 12,040 plus 20 pixels for margins on all sides. So let me actually say 1,300 pixels. So I'm going to give it a width of 1,300 pixels. And then I'll make that background color yellow. And let's see, so it's starting to come together a little bit. Now the footer is where it should be, it's down below, but now I have to get this main section back up to the top. So let's see the main section. I'm going to make the actually section 1, I'm going to make it a little bigger. And there you go. So I just didn't have enough space for my aside and my main section. So I can make that section 1 a little bit smaller now. So instead of 1,500, maybe I'll go back to like 14. Just kind of guessing, but if I had all these measurements laid out, no, this would be bigger, just a little bit closer. Okay, so that's a little bit better. But you start to see now how that wireframe is being used for my code, right? So I have wireframe in Photoshop. And then have all these details laid out in the wireframe so I can use my Photoshop wireframe as a guide. This red box, I probably use the shape tool to draw it. So now I have that as a guide, and I would start to put my measurements in here to lay out the page. So the important thing to think about though is with this wireframe is things that are next to each other, those are going to use floats. If you want to have two things that are coming from the, let's say, the left to the right, use a float of left. So I use floats on the images because they're next to each other, and I use floats on the div and the aside. When you want to have things that are together, you ensure you want those things to be together, then start to nest things. So you nest the aside and the div in this section 1. And then if you want to ensure that something comes after something in the flow of HTML, that section 1 will actually be used as the means to separate the header and the footer. So you have to have like a strategy in terms of how you're laying out the code to ensure everything comes together in the way that you want to. So generally, if I do have boxes next to each other, I'll have floats, and I'll use that floats in combination with nesting. If you don't use nesting, then you have to clear out your floats. So you have to use a clear tag or a clear property to ensure that you don't have another box float next to the floats that are already there. Because in CSS, what happens is you have to actually say you don't want to use those floats, and if you don't, you're going to have some weird layout effects with the floats. So you either use a clear property and you say clear both, or clear left or clear right, depending on if you use the float left or right. So I would start to do more with this, right? I would start to maybe, if it helps you, you can start to add borders and margins to everything on the page. So I can go into my style, and this is just temporary, but I'll use the universal selector and say border. Solid. You can say dashed. Dash is sometimes nice to use instead of solid. So I'll say border dashed red. Actually, I'll do make it blue. So obvious. That's a little too much in terms of the width. It's adding it to everything. It's adding it to the body and the HTML itself. And what will happen too is pushing, it's adding enough width where this box down here, the main box, is being pushed down. Maybe the main box needs to be less wide. So I just need to narrow that box. Okay, so that's better. And then let's say I start adding margins to everything as well. So I wanted to grab this margin, go to my section 1, just give it a margin of 10. Maybe the margin like header here. So just like less weak. So now I'm starting to space things out a little bit, but you can start to see how that wireframe is being transformed into the web page by putting in all those added details, adding text, adding my sizes, width and height, and starting to think about what needs to be a float and what needs to be nested. Any questions about this?
Can you post that code?
Yeah, so I'll post the code. We'll post all this code. Let's see if I can just, I generally won't do it like this, but let's see how this works. I posted it in Zoom, so you can cut and paste it right from Zoom.
Got cut off.
The what?
Bottom.
Oh, it didn't do it at all. I didn't properly focus on it. I didn't grab it all. Oh, you know what? It didn't do it?
No.
I wonder if it's too much code to put in there. It's too much. It doesn't like all of that. Oh, but what we can do is we can throw a file in here. So let's see. I will save my brackets code. And I'll save the wireframe example, and I'll throw those both into the Zoom. And I'll save the wireframe. Okay, so here you'll see back in Zoom. Lost my chat window. Here it is. This is the timer. So here, I'm going to send you guys that wireframe and the HTML example. So now you have both in Zoom. So I think that should help you too with your assignment that you're working on now in terms of layout. If you think about wireframe first, maybe just sketch something up. It wasn't part of the assignment, but just knowing how to lay out the structure of those two different web pages. So remember the assignment, it's called the one-day moment. I want one to be text focused, and I want one to be image focused. So for your image focused one and for your text focused one too, you want to think in terms of where the text is and how you're going to arrange things on the page itself. So using floats, using nesting, those are the two things that are going to help you do that. And then what will happen is you'll probably have questions about, well, I want this to be next to this, you know, side by side. Why doesn't it work? So I can help you individually with some of those different things in terms of just the layout using different combinations of nesting and flows. So any questions? So I think that's kind of like a lot of information.